Welcome to the Infinity Loop Group. I'm Riley.
I'm Krista.
And we just wanted to emphasize on our goal of the Infinity Loop Group and how it's about creating a new human. It's about the man and woman that understands how to walk in the masculine and the feminine. How do we find our balance to create a better world? With that being said, or unless there was something else you wanted to add to that?
And it's the divine masculine and divine feminine. We were having long talks this morning about how, the infinity loop is about the both and, not the either or. And the struggles I think we've had in society is that we have gone very either or, good patriarchy, bad patriarchy. You need to defend a patriarchy, patriarchal's all bad. And really what the vision that I saw and what's been sort of prophesied about where we're going in society is that we are going to be a new human that is much more conscious and healed, and that we need that. So there's things that are going whether you are a man or female, you are able to represent the masculine or feminine energy in everything you do. Yes, it is so much more holistic, and that a lot of the weaknesses, and that I would say the very unhealed masculine and unhealed feminine are not going to get us. We cannot keep fighting in between the two, and that the solutions are not working. And we are going to be facing very hard times in the world before we kind of break through. So we need to toughen up. We need to uplevel. We need to get more skilled. We need to be able to process our trauma so our trauma is not running the show. We need to go, there's bullying going on. What is going on from the trauma that is causing somebody to not be able to have more skills to deal with bullying? And as far as that needs to go, until someone needs to step in. But we don't always need to rescue people, right? We need to become stronger. We need to become more skilled at inquiry. We need to go get more skilled at going to inner stillness. We need to take this human experience a lot more seriously for our descendants and what's come to make this world, to really, truly change the world. So there's a lot of really nuanced conversations we're going to have about, men and women and the trauma and abuse and all that.
And just the best ways of moving forward, at least in how we see it, finding our balance.
Yeah. God. Sorry. We're going to talk about the whole leadership. Anyway, we'll go ahead.
Sexual harassment, exploitation, and abuse. The very fact that someone can manipulate people has to set off our alarms. It takes humility and curiosity and honesty to be willing to see the truth and stand up for what is love. Krista Vorse.
It saddens me that women don't always support those who have been used. They succumb to the cultic control of male power, charm, and authority. I might lose people right there, but that's okay. Keep listening. Some caretake these men who act like the victim when they've been exposed for how they exploit women. I've had every trick in the book used against me to shut me up, to cover for their cowardice. I brought the inconvenient truth. Wonder Woman would never look the other way or stand with someone because the guy is fun to be around. Sometimes women become the bullies and co-abusers to protect men if the abuser threatens their comfort or attachment to them. We know that with mothers who have looked the other way when the stepfather is sexually abusing the child. And that's just a common thing because of the financial position or the love that they're getting.
I mean, sadly, I remember an ex talking about that happening to her and bringing it to her mom, and the mom blamed her.
Oh, that would have been your mother. That happened to your mother too.
Well, it also happened to one of my exes.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like that is a reoccurring theme too of the mother's insecurity creating an opportunity for the child to be taken advantage of.
And in my situation, it was a male psychologist that supposedly told my mother that I was the problem and that I needed to be shipped off to a boarding school, that was the answer. Wonder Woman would never look the other way or stand with someone because the guy is fun to be around. Sometimes women become the bullies and co-abusers to protect men, but they'll couch it with doing it in spiritual language, as though, I call them sarcastically, the healing women of all tantric bliss. That's not a real group. I just made it up. That's the ooey gooey spirituality. That's the virtue signaling that they are more empathetic than everybody else in the world. It's that narcissism that we're seeing in society, Riley, now, that is coming out with, I'm more empathetic than everybody else. Right? And it's really coming from narcissism. They're using it as a an identity card, that they're so great. So they're now the healing. They're so healing for men that they will tell you how it's done. It's what I call ooey gooey spirituality, has the belief that either standing by or protecting an abuser is loving and right. This is done without any evidence that these men are committed or capable of changing their behavior, even if these men say the right seductive speeches to garner support. The healing women of all tantric bliss believe they're more spiritual than the women who actually have the courage to tell the truth in the face of all that would come against them by doing so. These women who speak up are well aware those associated with abuser will be embarrassed. The ones who tell the truth feel that pain in their hearts, but know they're here for more than to protect people from being embarrassed. That's the politeness. That's the first field, the lowest field of the 4 fields of conversation, the politeness that is all face-saving. We're not going to point anything out that would ever embarrass anybody or bring anything really to the light. We got to make sure everybody's always feeling all good. They heed a higher call. They're aware it's easier to do nothing. Women who speak up are lovers of truth. They want to change the world. They know what's coming, that they'll be judged and told they're doing it wrong, and it's not the way to heal the masculine and their wounded feminine. These courageous women will be seen as vindictive, inappropriate, spewing their drama and trauma, lying, crazy, willing participants, and blaming their past pain on the accused. They'll be told it's not helpful to use labels. There are no victims, that they're projecting, this is gossip, and that these conversations should be done in private. Their very wounds will be used against them. They're seen as trying to bring down men who are wounded, but are good souls that bring good into the world. Some who speak up may not be healed, transformed, all cleaned up, and do it perfectly. That is true. But it's wrong to treat women who have legitimately been abused as though they are the perpetrators. Women who expose a charming abuser are ousted as the abuser's tribe circles the wagons around him. I have told the truth about every one of my abusers. Eventually, I know the list well. It's not fun, but it's purifying. We can all fall under the spell of ooey gooey spirituality. Confused about what is loving and right, we stumble. Struggling to find our footing, we grab what is comfortable. We don't like drama, and being woken up from an abuser's cult is both dramatic and traumatic. Also, a woman's truth-telling can trigger our own pain we've tried to push down. We think we're ready to have our wound all sewn up, but the truth-teller brings the message, you still have a bullet in there, and that bullet is laced with poison. Soberly, we reflect on the times and ways we didn't speak up and shine the light. We must have a way to feel healthy shame about our complicity without decompensating because we believe our weakness has the power to name who we are. Remember the book, the chapter, The Red Pouch. We can change the world by changing how we choose to humble ourselves and acknowledge we've been duped by these men who we find cute and cuddly, witty and wonderful. It's up to each and every one of us to wake up, be courageous for each other, and stop looking the other way. Here are some of James Finley's thoughts on the complexity of the issue. Abuse is when a relationship has one person with more power than the other. And the one who has more power sexualizes the relationship and exploits it to their own gratification at the price of the other. In which case, they dehumanize, dishonor, or violate the dignity of the other and show no sense of empathy or caring about that. In situations like this, there are two things not present. One is force. This isn't a situation where there is physical force, the knife, the gunpoint. And the reason there's no force is because none is needed, because there's no resistance. The second thing not present. And understanding why there's no resistance, we understand why this goes so deep and is so destructive. Because there is force, a dark force of another kind. And the person is in a position where it's very personal to them and it's very scary by just how to cope with this. So they tend to give external compliance to avoid being attacked or abandoned or face the consequences. And as soon as they do that, then they're in collusion with the secret. And there's a base of shame. That's the shame. Why didn't I fight back, right? Why did I allow this to happen?
The what you permit is what you promote.
Yeah, and you feel it, but you don't know, which we'll talk about. But why didn't I? What kind of dark force was I feeling? Why didn't I? Why didn't I speak up? Why didn't I resist?
Because you weren't taught. You didn't have the skills to.
Well,
right?
and really, we were talking earlier about this. It's at least 30% of women have had childhood sexual abuse, and when that pattern starts, it's so psychically traumatic. It's so wrong. We know it's so not to be. There's no way to say, oh, this is normal, that you split. And then when you kind of leave, you dissociate from your body, you don't have that integrated fire within you to fight back. That's the interesting thing, because I had a lesbian gym teacher, although she wasn't out, it was so obvious she was lesbian, for 4 years. And she would do creepy things, whereas like the girls had to we were in junior high, walk in and open our towel to show that we showered. And because I had never been sexually abused, I've never been sexually abused in any way by a woman, I didn't have that wound. So I was the one who frickin' go, no fucking way am I doing that. I mean, it was like known throughout the schools, like, oh, Krista, I threw a recorder, those like little recorder instruments at her. I basically was like, fuck you, you pervert. I'm not doing it. And I like made a stand, but because I didn't have that trauma with a woman, I had no problem standing up to a woman. And that's the complexity that we're looking at of understanding why does someone behave the way they do, and how do you heal and help someone heal and come back into their power to stop this. And it is not by demonizing men that all men are perverts, right? And all women are just castrating bitches, right? It's terrible I said that. What makes it so hard for the person to come out into the open? Why does it take so much courage? It takes so much courage because, one, the price they will pay. Mind you, this was written in 17 too. That's why anyone in a situation like this needs to have the very prudent courage to bring it to the light. And they need someone who's got their back to talk this through and not be naive about the consequences. So one is the realities of that. And here's what's bigger. When you come out into the open, the society will side with the perpetrator. That
not necessarily anymore.
Yeah, I don't think we're all the way there, but yeah, there's places where it's gone to the extreme, right? One way or the other. But that has been.
Well, I think of her, Amber Heard, and then I also think.
Oh yeah.
And then what?
Oh God, Amber Heard.
And then there's this other woman who famously framed the baseball player, and famously framed the baseball player. Like her text messages have even came out about bragging about getting the bag
for money,
and that
shit happens.
And so there is the both and, but yes, for the majority, they believe. Well. Now we're starting to believe women, but then because of these few examples, there's now this lashback to not believe them.
Yeah.
And it's tough.
Yeah. Like that whole phrase, believe all women is again, there's no both and. There's no both and in that. And so that's like, you can't question a woman. It's again, there's no both and. It's the either or.
Well, it's any environment that we create that encourages, the believing of all men or all women. Some men or some women will take advantage of that. So that's why it's so important to us to have the discernment for whether it is a man or woman bringing up any accusations.
Yeah. I would say even in 2018, 19, when I have shared some that happened to me, it was again immediately trying to justify the man's behavior and just assumed I was talking about something, like no inquiry. I was talking about something I was not even talking about. And I know I'm being super vague. So you're kind of like going, what? Okay, let's just, they're just immediate. There's no curiosity. There's just defense of the man and men's sexuality or men's their attractions. Like no curiosity to go deeper.
Or blaming of the woman.
And blaming of the woman and you're bad. You're bad. And like I said about, even a woman coach who immediately, it's the woman's trauma. There's no way this man did this. Right? And the reason they side with the perpetrator is complicated because society doesn't want to question the father figure. That's true. That is in the psychic. That is something that we have to be aware of. It is, you see it. You see.
But I think I would argue that that's being broken down, especially, the ultimate father figure is father government. And there's never, at least in the United States, been a time where we probably had more distrust for our government than we do right now. And I think that is a larger manifestation of us being willing to question our fathers. And I think there is a lot of good that comes out of questioning the father figure. But as a collective right now, we are throwing the father out of the picture, right? And so this is about finding that balance between how do we have healthy father figures and understand, no, we do need fathers, but we need them to be healthy, not just there. Being present isn't what we're about. We're about being present and healthy.
But the person's status in the situation that they're in doesn't give them the right to exploit, sexualize, or take advantage of anybody. And the more people come out into the open, the more there's a possibility of a tide shifting here where it could reach critical mass and more people will get the courage to come out. And it comes out. As it comes out into the open, it breaks the secrecy because it can only continue where there's collective collusion and secrecy. I would say the people that I did share what happened to me, which is just a lifelong pattern, most of them turned on me. Most of them, you're not really believed. There's enough skepticism created. There's enough maneuvering and a capacity to manipulate that someone wants to go back to the charming male as their friend, as someone they support, and they stand and circle the wagons around.
Would you say that that is a product of being in a small town, or do you believe that that happens anywhere where the man has a position of financial power?
No, it's not just a small town. Is that this kind of stuff, we still have a lot more work to do to heal the trauma in our society and the patterns. I mean, I could say when I came out, and this was in Los Angeles, about my sexual abuser when I was 16 and he was 32, I was, mind you, this was, the early 80s, but I was skewered. That was a big reason I got into the cult. I was skewered by 5 men in a church meeting. And I was just like a little girl picking at a little pillow. And I was only the bad person. And this person had been kicked off. He was an actor. He had been kicked off the Grease tour for beating up his girlfriend. He was a terrifying human being. He was just so false, and I saw right through it. It's just so interesting. And it was that trauma that happened to me completely changed my life. It changed who I was. It changed the trajectory of opportunities. I mean, it really contributed to me being in the cult because I was like, I need mentoring. What the fuck is wrong with me that I allowed this to happen? So, I mean, I have many, many stories, but I also, it's again, back to what Dr. Pagcola Estes talks about in Women Who Run with the Wolves is what is it within the women's psyche that also submits to male authority? It's so deep. And so that's where the collective is. It's not making men bad. It's feeling the wound, the brokenness in both men and women that we have inherited. And that is the part of the patriarchy, Riley, that I say I don't like burn the patriarchy. I don't like that whole thing because it's filled with so much.
Let's smash the patriarchal abuse. Let's agree with that there is abuse that is perpetrated onto people disguised as patriarchy. And I would say that is what we want to diminish or to destroy, to shatter into a million pieces. Yeah,
you and I I know you say there's no dirty words, but I call it packed. I feel like the whole charged. I would say the whole patriarchal word is so, it's very hard for me to defend the term patriarchy as a good thing because within it's interpreted, because the way it's interpreted and understood, we're looking again at a new masculine and a new feminine in the infinity loop where, like you say, both wings, we're using both wings so we can like fly right.
Right. We don't want a patriarchal society or a matriarchal society. We want an infinity loop society.
And what does that mean? And it doesn't mean there's not places where we submit and surrender and who's holding the leadership. And I love male leadership.
The submit and surrender should come from choice, not beyond choice of you should be almost excited or encouraged to submit to surrender because you know you're being led by an honorable person, whether it is male or female. The submitting and surrendering shouldn't come from a place of feeling the need to, but almost excited to go, no, my role in this position is to submit, is to surrender, because this objective that we are trying to achieve, whoever is leading understands that they're trying to take everyone, not just my team, or, I'm only trying to help men, or I'm only trying to help people that believe on my blue team or my red team or whatever. No, I'm trying to help all human beings.
And I did see even in the 90s in health, in I remember one church, that's where it was taught very well to men in development of men. It's that your wife would want to submit to you because you're like laying down, you're so good. You're such a good man. And, naturally being so feminine, like I love supporting men. And there's times when I would have every right to step forward, in the company, in the family. It's a whole new dance in the infinity loop that I believe we are moving toward.
Well, I think about too of finding that balance, and I think of my relationship with my girlfriend, who is a very much a badass, could accomplish all the things she wants to do. Yeah, a lioness.
An alpha woman. She's an alpha woman.
But as we lean more and more into our relationship, we realize that there are points where she leans to me to lead, where she goes, she asks a question and she doesn't want what do you want? No. She wants me to take charge and make a decision. And so it's about finding that balance of where it is right, because I think it was even not natural because of how much of society we're almost told as men not to lead. Right. I feel like there's this big push onto like, oh no, well, what does she want? And it's like, from my experience from dating, that's not helpful in a relationship. But it's about getting to that point. We don't jump from one to the other. It's about kind of swimming along to there, if that makes sense. It's not going from the extremes, but understanding when there's a time to lead.
Amen. The shame is by implication that if you didn't resist, how can you claim you were abused? Oh. And there's the tripping point right there. One aspect of the spiritual stance is that we have to have compassion and empathy for those coming forward. We become a part of the societal acceptance and believe in them. So it's interesting that he said, believe in them, not believe them. Believe in them. We believe, we are not coming with just the skepticism. We are believing in them. We are making space to what needs to come up and help them. It's also help for the perpetrators because they're also tragically broken. They also need help. Speaking up is how perpetrators are held accountable and potentially helped. But as we know, not all perpetrators are capable of change. Our compassion for these men who do this must not cause us to weaken in standing with these women or cause us to get played by these men.
Change.
Yeah, and it's time. We women are complicit in this. We don't see it. We don't fully see it. Because it's our own shame. Yeah. And our own disgust of weak women. There's so much disgust toward people who have been abused and didn't fight back because it's ignorance. We don't understand trauma.
Is there someone you need to question your loyalty and support to who has been exposed as a sexual abuser, predator, user? Did you use inquiry to dig deep enough already?
I talked about that in another podcast when I went to a woman in her 50s and I said, I need to tell you this, blah, 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 blah. And she went, oh my. And then she went home after the walk and liked all this person's Facebook posts. And when I brought it up to someone, they go, oh, it's just her trauma. Yes, if it's our trauma that causes us to split and not make a stand, but we are responsible for healing our trauma. If our trauma is keeping us complicit, if our trauma is causing us to look the other way when our child is being sexually abused because we were traumatized. I will say this vaguely, but a story was told to me about someone who was sexually abused by their father until they left for college, all those years. And then when they walked in and saw their father, which would be her child's grandfather, molesting her child, she walked out. And it was her trauma. And she went, and it started coming out when the child went to college, which is very often when stuff, and she ended up, it went back and she said, I have to live with that for the rest of my life. And I have so much compassion because I understand what that's like. And it wasn't because she was dependent. She was 6. She didn't need her father anymore. And she actually kicked her father out of her life and made a stand. And then he died shortly after. But, that's the compassion of what trauma has done. And this is why I am so committed of what I believe that the Infinity Loop was given to us to help heal society and to heal our trauma, because it is in the presence of the widest view that kind of divine love and that can rip the lie that was planted in us and put the truth in and help us find our true power, not the power where women are now misusing their power to bash the patriarchy, instead of coming with so much skill and wholeness and love, which is the greatest power to heal both men and women. And how can you judge? And that's why I could never, that was done to me. And you could say, well, my mother did it because she was comfortable in her money. But the truth is, when you really bring it all down to it, we are not free even in our choices because of our unconsciousness and our scarcity and our fear. We are trapped by them. Until we really know how to live in our true selves, we don't even have the power to do the right thing so much, right? It's wrong, but to me, nothing is unforgivable because they knew not what they do. My mother knew not what she did. It was her own. Yeah, I mean, I say
this as kind of a very extreme point, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. To where if you truly understood what someone went through, even if they are a mass shooter, you would probably have a lot more sympathy for them. You wouldn't look at them as this evil person, but you would understand the pain and suffering that person had to go to reach the point of where then they are projecting their pain and suffering, literally ending people's lives. And so that's always about just going to the bigger picture and holding that sympathy for. And I remember struggling.
Sam Harris saying, I think we're going to be able to see more as we grow in the neuroscience, to be able to look into people's brains and the imaging and go, oh, that's why they did that. That's why their brain looks that way from a sociopath. That's not the full, but more like understanding the sociopathic brain or what happened there. Where's your skepticism on that? What you're not buying that one?
Yeah, I mean,
because he's so not into free will kind of thing?
Yeah, I guess I don't. it's too much of, oh, there's an excuse for your bad behavior. Oh, there's an excuse for you not processing that healthily. Oh, to me, it's a little too writing off of not doing the individual work.
Yeah,
But I understand the point as well. A Tale of Two Men.
Wait a minute. Do we want? I do feel like I did want to say this. This was
please.
a really good point. Kind of in some of the questions about we've judged women, we've kind of crossed that one. But that thing of, and this is why we are able to, when we believe in women, we are able to walk with them and to create the space to help them even question some of the things that they are believing. And we know many stories where this has then been used, where women don't even have to be questioned and they just tell themselves a story. I mean, we know a story where we're like in hot yoga, it was where people were wearing almost their basically equivalent to just barely underwear. And if you look over them, they're like, oh my God, this person's leering. They can't come to my yoga studio. Like the way men have been, and women can't even be questioned in their stories or how they, understanding the dance, or like now making the male gaze all bad. Like the extreme that we have gone to is very problematic.
I think that
we should be able to question anything in a loving, connected way.
I think the emphasis that I would like to make on about the importance of how do we heal from this is that the healing comes from the masculine and the feminine. It's not one or the other. It's healing both.
We help each other heal.
Yeah.
And I heard someone say that it's the divine feminine that is going to help the masculine heal. And
it's how I view it is it's the divine feminine that holds the inner child of men that creates a healthy adult men. Right? So it's as we step into our divine feminine, no matter how old a man is, we are able to see their inner child and hold that inner child to heal the wounds to allow that man to step into being an alpha male. The divine masculine.
Yeah, I would say the alpha male in again, the best way.
Well, in the purest, healthiest form, not in the insecurities trying to fill the lack in ego, but the alpha male that knows that he is there to protect and support those younger than him and women and children and all that.
The strong man.
A Tale of Two Men. Speaking of the strong man.
Can I say that again? That's really interesting because I've heard women who really like kind of the money, ego-driven men, alpha men kind of going, oh, but that's just being an alpha man. It's not. She's claimed that, the alpha man. But what we're talking about is the integrated. It doesn't have to be either or. If someone is a strong man, it doesn't have to be that you're just dealing with the ego bullshit.
The divine masculine is able to show up as an alpha man, not from their ego.
Meaning they're not serving their ego is serving their greater warrior strength.
Not trying to blame athletes of this, but I would say the traditional athlete alpha male is the ego-driven alpha male. And that is, I would say, the opposite. I'm not saying all of them. I'm just saying it's a good archetype. It's the classic. They're going to sleep with a lot of women. They're going to make a bunch of money. They do these physical attributes that a lot of people can't do. So they get to live a life that other people don't get to live. So then they get idolized. And again, it all kind of roots into physical values, not emotional, spiritual, and real, in my opinion, real masculine values, which are leadership, strength, emotional regularity. A lot of these quote unquote alpha males have no emotional regularity, you know, especially these athletes. It's like that's a lot of what they do is explode, and, you know, they don't have, there's so lack of being in touch with their divine feminine that it's so much easier for them to make decisions that take advantage of women. A Tale of Two Men. I've been humbled that I don't have special powers to coach someone who can't see themselves and won't change. The experts in reality are right. Now I just show up, but let go. Krista.
There were two middle-aged men. Both had the father wound. Both transmitted their self-hatred onto those closest to them. Many never saw those traits, but only the qualities that were more likable. But they couldn't and wouldn't keep the darkest parts from their family. How could they? Our families bump up against us like no other, and the irritation of that bump hits the trigger switch. They felt powerful in those moments when in their anger and control, they didn't have to feel their shame and powerlessness from the pain they carried from before kindergarten. But one man, when confronted with how he hurt others, broke. The losses and being miserable on the deepest level made him crack. He knew he was imprisoned by emotions that had all the power, and he stayed cracked. In those cracks, he carried his weak, tired body to wise, skilled healers who could see past all his defense mechanisms, his charm, his coping skills that had kept him from transforming for decades. He faced all the ways he had hurt others by not wanting to face his own cowardice, selfishness, and brokenness. But the other man was nearly impossible to confront because his enormous ego and abusive rage terrified those from speaking up. When he was confronted, he may have cried for himself, may have tried to convince, did I miss a page?
Nope.
May have tried to convince others through elaborate maneuvers that he was, quote unquote, getting his shit together. However, he couldn't see or feel the pain he caused others. He couldn't even remember doing those things. Others said he did. He had, quote unquote, a slightly different perspective. He found a support system that supported his image, his illusions, and his likability. He made sure there was no way in hell he would have to crack. And so he didn't. There were two young men, one who was confronted with how his bullying, lust, and manipulation hurt others. When he was confronted, he broke. He wept with a sorrow for his capacity to hurt others. He didn't like that person he was. This young man was so committed to not living in self-deception, he overcame the ongoing temptation to pity himself and tell others how unfair it was. There were lots of ups and downs with the process of transformation, but he became a better man because of it. The other young man was also confronted. He was more successful at avoiding others who would help him crack open. He spent his energy charming others to keep from speaking truth that could have set him free. He didn't change because he didn't have to. He wasn't in touch with what his soul yearned for. Instead, he went with what his ego yearned for. We get confused. For that, we need compassion. We think letting go, cracking open, surrendering our tricks so that we can truly live isn't better than the life we may be living. However, every time we crack more, every time we allow our hearts to be broken as we yearn to be loved, we get to live the better story. It's a tale worth writing ourselves into because we get to be the hero. It's a tale worth leaving behind as our legacy. That's what we call a happy ending.
You Using your discernment, in what ways will you tell someone who's willing and capable of change and someone whose psychic paycheck for their ego-driven and wound-driven behavior is too great to want to give up?
I would say that we have to acknowledge that charm is at play, and that we like charm and we like likability, and we have to go, where's our mask and where do we commit to staying awake to live in truth?
So are you saying that sometimes people would use charm to kind of disguise the view of, oh, I'm changing and growing, when they're not really changing and growing? They're using the charm to kind of deceive. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. That could be, or that, right. Or we don't even see it. Right. You see these things, but then you fall back under the charm. So you become part of the problem because you're complicit.
So would you say that people that are really charming are harder to change? I guess I would say that.
Yeah, people would,
because I would say the more likely, when you're super charming and things like that, it's easier to deflect and not really be called to question to the real things that need to be changed in your life.
Yeah, because there's a dropping of the charm when you're cracked open and broken. There's a dropping of that as your
when you're
tricks.
sharing your shortcomings and you're being truly vulnerable, you can't really be charming, or at least if you're being honest, you shouldn't be charming.
It's very different. This is such an interesting thing for us to explore.
Great love and great suffering invites us to change. How will you encourage others to choose to take the transformational path and do the work?
That's where a woman, like when we clean up our side of the street and we're not the castrating bitch, that encourages us. When we are not in our authentic power of ourselves to self-regulate and be able to come from that deepest source, which is love and life, and look upon that person as though they were that man and they were our own sons, with such compassion and skill in developing, then it's a stumbling block. But when we are in that field of love and creating that field of deep connection, awareness, and inquiry, that is giving the male the greatest opportunity to feel safe enough to they're not feeling so shamed that they can face their own. Shame arises naturally in them, and self-awareness. It makes it safe for them to do very painful work.
I think it's really important that you talked about the importance of safety. And this next question is, how will you create safety for others to look at themselves and not fear the death they must go through to change? And to me, this is where it comes into that loop. As a man, I need to step into my divine masculine and love the woman in a way where she feels comforted and safe and protected, for her to be able to step into her divine feminine and feel. And then it's like it's the infinity loop. As we heal each other's, as we heal our own wounds, we start healing each other's, and it will continue to heal each other because we are creating a healing space. And I really believe it. As a woman steps into her divine feminine, she's able to turn and see the inner child of the man and heal that, or at least create the space that creates the opportunity for the man to start to try and heal that, it's this loop of, as we step into our divine version of ourself, we are able to help the other person step into their divine. And we have
to be careful because it depends on what the relationship is. Like if it's a marriage and you got kids, it's like, the stakes are very high. You don't just bail on it because until
because it got tough.
because, or, when all this stuff coming out, or you're like, oh my God, this is because it's so much about our work, right? Why we chose this person, what we're into, how do you help heal? But it's like, if you're in a newer relationship and you start to see some of this stuff, you go, am I going to continue to invest if someone is not willing to do it? Because you will then get terrible abuse. You will probably suffer terribly.
The sooner you start doing the work in the relationship, the better the relationship is. Because either you realize how it's not a right fit for both of you, or, you're able to move on, which saves you probably a lot of suffering. There's this message I heard recently it was kind of like, stop taking photos of your girlfriends and stop making these quote unquote great memories while you're dating. If you're going to get married, you'll have a lifetime of great memories. Let's start having the difficult conversations. Let's make things uncomfortable sooner instead of waiting for the problems to arise when we've invested so much into it that we now don't even want to address the problem because we're so invested into the relationship. And I really respect and appreciate that. And I think that's something I try to embody in my relationship, of having the difficult conversations before they even happen. You go, hey, this might happen to us. How would we deal with that? It's a beautiful dance that we are all having to have with each other, but only together can we get to the destination we all desire. Together we accomplish more. That's a phrase I've always loved to say. But thank you again so much for joining us on this journey of the Infinity Loop group, as we are learning out loud and sharing our thoughts on communication and connection. And may this journey bring light to your life and help share with others so that we can continue this conversation and change the world together. Have a blessed day.